The gaslight blinked again. That smug little bastard. And I slammed my hand against the wheel. "You've gotta be fucking kidding me!" I hissed, my voice shaking with frustration. The damn thing had been taunting me for an hour, and I hadn't seen so much as a hint of a gas station. Just dark roads, endless rain, and the growing fear that I was about to end up stranded in the middle of nowhere. The wipers squeaked against the windshield, struggling to keep up with the downpour. I scanned the road ahead, the dark stretching out like it had no end. "Come on," I muttered, knuckles aching from gripping the wheel. "Come on. There's gotta be something." And then, like a miracle, the faint glow of a gas station cut through the rain. My chest loosened, and I muttered a quiet, "Thank God," as I turned into the lot. It felt like salvation, even if it was the kind that came with bad coffee and overpriced snacks. I didn't care. I needed gas, and I wasn't picky. I pulled into the lot, the tires skidding slightly on the wet pavement. The place was dead quiet. No cars, no people, just the hiss of rain on the roof and the faint hum of the overhead lights. I cut the engine and grabbed my purse, already drenched from the short walk to the door. Inside, the warmth hit me like a slap, thick and stale. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and cleaning chemicals, with a sharper, metallic tang lurking underneath. My boots squeaked on the tile floor, the sound uncomfortably loud against the droning hum of the fluorescent lights. The rows of shelves were sparse, half-empty racks of snacks, dusty bottles of soda, and a sad little carousel of faded postcards boasting, "Welcome to Nebraska." The coffee machine gurgled weakly in the corner, struggling to stay alive. A fan near the back clicked with every slow rotation, adding to the strange mechanical rhythm of the place. Everything felt tired, worn-out linoleum, warped shelves, and scuffed counters that looked like they'd been around since the 70s. Even the air tasted off, like it had been recycled one too many times. I felt a shiver crawl up my back, but I told myself it was just the rain. Nothing about this place was welcoming, but then again, nothing about this night had been. That's when I noticed the guy behind the counter. He looked like one of those night shift types, expressionless, hunched slightly, and waiting for the clock to set him free. "Evening," I said, my voice sharp with leftover irritation. He didn't reply, didn't even glance at me, just stood there, staring at something I couldn't see. I grabbed a cup and started pouring coffee, the sound of the liquid hitting the paper the only noise in the shop. "Rough night?" I tried, my tone more biting than friendly. "Or are you always this chatty?" I frowned, my unease rising. Something about him didn't feel right. His posture was stiff, and the shadows from the lights caught his face wrong. I shook it off. I was just tired. The silence pressed against me as I turned back toward the counter, coffee in hand. I cleared my throat as I stepped closer. "You want me to guess which pump still works, or are you just enjoying the show?" I said, gesturing vaguely toward the rain outside. My breath caught. The guy hadn't moved an inch. His hand was stretched across the counter, holding a pack of gum like he was mid-sail. My stomach flipped. His skin glinted under the lights, smooth and shiny like plastic. His eyes were just dark, glossy pits. His mouth stretched into a stiff, unnatural grin that didn't belong on any living thing. "Jesus," I whispered, the coffee cup slipping from my hand. It hit the floor with a loud splash, soaking into the mat beneath my boots. My heart pounded as I stepped back, my hands trembling. "Hey," I said, forcing a nervous laugh that sounded fake even to me. "If this is some kind of prank, you've got me. Real funny." I stumbled back, my hands shaking as I pointed toward the counter. "This is not funny," I shouted, my voice cracking against the emptiness. "Whoever set this up, you got me. Joke's over, all right? Just come out." Nothing. No laughter, no footsteps, no reveal of some night shift employee grinning at their handiwork. Just the hum of the lights and the faint clicking of that broken fan in the corner. The silence pressed down on me, heavier than the rain. I turned toward the shelves, my pulse hammering in my ears. "What is this?" I yelled, louder this time, my voice cracking. My hand dove into my purse, fingers clutching the cold, reassuring can of pepper spray. "I'm armed, all right. You hear me?" I shouted, my knuckles whitening around the small canister. "If this is a joke, it's about to end real fucking bad for you." The shop didn't answer. My breath hitched as I turned back to the counter. The mannequin, or whatever it was, hadn't moved, but I could feel its presence like it was pressing against my chest, stealing the air from my lungs. My fists clenched at my sides as I fought back the hot tears threatening to spill. "You're not real," I whispered, shaking my head. "You're just plastic. Just a goddamn joke." I stumbled toward the door, my steps unsteady as I gritted my teeth. "Fine," I shouted, my voice echoing. "You win, okay? I'll just pump my fucking gas and leave. Screw you." I shoved the door open, the cold rain hitting me like a slap as I stormed back outside. My boots splashed through puddles as I headed for the pump, my hands trembling as I grabbed the nozzle. The metal felt slick against my fingers, the smell of gasoline sharp and nauseating as I jammed it into the tank. I glanced back at the shop. Through the rain-smeared glass, I could still see it. The mannequin stood in its same stiff pose, hand outstretched, that awful grin fixed in place. But something was different. Its head. It was tilted just slightly, just enough that I could swear it was facing me now. My breath hitched, and I froze, the nozzle slipping from my hand and clanging against the pump. "No," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rain. "No. You're imagining things. You're just tired. You're only seeing what you want to see." The pump clicked off, and I jumped, my heart slamming against my ribs. I yanked the nozzle out, spilling gas on the ground as I didn't bother putting it back into place. My hands shook as I fumbled with the gas cap, my fingers numb from the cold. "Just leave," I muttered to myself, slamming my car door and locking it in one frantic motion. My breath fogged the windshield as I started the engine, the headlights cutting through the rain and illuminating the empty lot. But I couldn't bring myself to look back at the shop. I didn't want to know if it was watching me. The tires squealed as I sped away, the rain still falling in relentless sheets. It tapped against the windshield like fingers drumming, a steady, maddening rhythm that matched the pounding in my chest. The gas gauge had finally crept up, but the knot in my stomach hadn't loosened. I kept my eyes on the road, refusing to glance at the mirrors. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I looked back, I'd see that thing grinning at me from the back seat. The wipers struggled to keep up with the downpour. I told myself I was almost home. Just a little farther, and I'd be pulling into my mama's driveway. She'd have the porch light on. I just knew she would. She always did, even when I told her not to wait up. "So, you know I'm here," she'd say with her raspy laugh. The thought almost made me cry. God, I just needed to see her, to hear her voice. She'd tell me I was being ridiculous, that it was all in my head. She'd probably laugh about it, then make me sit down with a cup of cocoa while she put on one of her crime shows. I clung to that thought like a lifeline, willing my shaking hands to steady. A boy stood on the shoulder of the highway, his small hands clutching a baseball. His face caught the headlights, smooth and plastic, blank and lifeless. The rain slid off him, pooling at his feet like he wasn't really there. My stomach twisted as I realized he hadn't been there a second ago. He couldn't have been. My heart stopped. My foot hovered over the brake, but I didn't press it. I couldn't. I just kept driving, my breath catching in shallow gasps. "Not happening," I whispered, gripping the wheel tighter. "Not fucking happening." But then there was another. A man leaning against a mile marker, his arms crossed. His baseball cap was pulled low over his plastic face, the rain streaking down his frozen grin. His head turned ever so slightly as I passed, and those dark pits that should have been eyes followed me. As I took my exit, the worse it got. They were everywhere now, figures lining the sidewalks, standing motionless in the pouring rain. A woman in a sundress holding an umbrella, her face tilted toward the sky like she was admiring the storm. A group of children frozen mid-run on the side of the road, their hands outstretched in a silent game of tag. Each one was smooth, plastic, and wrong, and their heads turned ever so slightly as I passed. "Just get home to Mama," I muttered, my voice shaking. "She'll know what to do." The road curved, and the first houses of my neighborhood came into view. My stomach dropped. The mannequins were here too. They stood in yards and on porches, under mailboxes, and leaning against lamp posts. A man crouched by a flower bed, frozen mid-weed, his plastic hands gripping a pair of gardening shears. A woman in a housecoat stood on her porch, holding a watering can as if she'd just stepped out to tend her plants. But the plants were dead. Everything was. I slammed on the brakes as one of them stepped into the road. It wasn't exactly walking. It just shifted, one moment on the sidewalk, and the next standing in front of me, its head tilted slightly, and its dark, empty eyes locked onto mine. I screamed, my voice cracking. My hands shook as I pounded on the horn, but the figure didn't move. It just stood there, letting the rain pour down on its glossy, unmoving face. My stomach churned, and I yanked the wheel, swerving around it. The tires skidded on the wet pavement, and for a horrifying moment I thought I'd spin out. But the car held, and I straightened it out, speeding the last few blocks to Mama's house. Her porch light was on, just like I knew it would be. I pulled into the driveway, slamming the car into park and scrambling out. The rain hit me hard, soaking through my clothes in seconds. I stumbled toward the door, fumbling with my keys. "Mama!" I shouted, my voice hoarse. "Mama, open the door! It's me!" The house was dark inside. The porch light flickered above me as I shoved the key into the lock, twisting it with trembling hands. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside, dripping water onto the old hardwood floors. "Mama?" I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. "Are you here?" The house smelled like it always did. Clean and faintly floral, with a hint of whatever she'd last cooked, but something felt off. The quiet was oppressive, thick like the air before a storm. I turned on the lights, one by one, moving from room to room. "Mama, come on!" I called again, my voice cracking. "It's late, I know, but I need to see you." I stopped at the foot of the stairs. My stomach dropped. She was there, standing at the top. "Oh, Mama," I whispered, relief surging through me. "Thank God. You won't believe what just—" The words died in my throat as she stepped into the light. Her face wasn't hers. Her skin was smooth, catching the dim glow like polished glass. Her warm, kind eyes were gone, replaced by hollow, dark pits. Her lips curved into an unnatural smile that stretched too wide. "No," I whispered, stumbling back. My knees buckled, and I grabbed the banister to steady myself. The sound of glass crunching underfoot froze me in place. My head snapped toward the living room, toward the dark doorway where I could hear the faint, deliberate creak of footsteps. They were inside. I turned and bolted up the stairs, my heart pounding as I scrambled past her, past it, and into the attic. My hands shook as I yanked the ladder up behind me, slamming the hatch shut. My lungs burned as I gasped for air, the rain hammering against the roof just above me. I climbed through the small roof hatch, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. The shingles were slick with rain, and I nearly slipped as I pulled myself onto the roof. And then I saw them. They filled the yard, the street, the whole neighborhood. Hundreds of them, all standing perfectly still, their heads tilted up toward me. Their arms hung limp at their sides, but I could feel their attention, their anticipation. My hands trembled as I clutched my arms, but something felt wrong. My skin was smooth. I looked down and froze. My fingers gleamed faintly in the dim light, the lines on my palms fading into nothing. Tears streaked down my face as I sank to my knees. Below, the mannequins tilted their heads in unison, like they all knew. And for the first time all night, I stopped feeling afraid.